Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming out tonight for the Plan Commission meeting for February 6th. I know it's a little inclement out there and the driving is not that bad, but bad enough, but we appreciate you coming out tonight. First order of business is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion approved.
And do I have a
Second.
second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You're elected, Jeff. So, want to say that the Plan Commission is an advisory board to the Board of Trustees. The decisions we make tonight is a recommendation on the cases that we will send to the board. They will have a final vote on these cases at their meeting. They meet on the first Monday and the third Monday of every month. And there should be a sign-up sheet there. If you sign up tonight, give us your name and address, and we will notify you when these cases will go before the board. And you also get, if you want copies of the report too, you can request that too. So first case tonight is case 2020-01, and that is a zoning map amendment at 7400 Skokie Boulevard. And Mike Wojtek, our associate planner, will, I'm sorry, do we have the petitioner for this case coming up tonight?
And Paul, could we ask that 01 and 02 be described?
Yeah, I'm gonna, as soon as he comes up, I'm gonna ask him that. Good evening. I see that you have multiple cases tonight, so what I'd like to do is I'll ask you to present both cases tonight,
Okay.
since they're related.
Okay.
Is there,
Yes, sir.
is it okay with you? Okay. Can I have your name, please?
Yes, my name is David Kim. I'm the president of MedTech, and we are here to request for a special permit usage for one of the buildings in Skokie, 7400 Skokie Boulevard.
Sir, can I interrupt you? Could you raise your right hand? Excuse me. Do you affirm that the testimony you give tonight is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you?
Yes, sir.
Sure. Counselor, is the notice in order?
Notice is proper and correct.
Thank you. Sir, please, go ahead.
Okay. MedTech, our mission is to serve and advocate for our community's older adults and their caregivers. We fulfill our missions in two ways. First is to provide home care aids to our clients' houses to carry out non-medical basic needs such as cleaning, cooking, shopping, and also provide that companionship. Second way we fulfill our mission is through our adult day service centers. We right now operate 3 at the moment. And this is a place where we provide a place for our older adults to get together and socialize. Once they're there, just like childcare, we provide meals that are dietitian approved and provide a number of mentally as well as physically challenging activities within the guidelines. These activities include arts and crafts, a number of musically related lessons, guitar, ukulele, harmonica, to name a few. They play board games, they talk about social issues, and we try to minimize political conversations because that could get sometimes heated. And we provide food transportation. We pick them up, we drop them off. And so we are here to seek your permission to occupy one of the spaces at 7400 Skokie Boulevard.
Okay. Any questions? Commissioner Quinn?
Could you further elaborate on transportation scenarios? I know you're operating, I think I read 8:30 to 2:30, something like that.
Yes, sir.
and you have pickup and drop-off. Describe really the course of a day what that looks like.
Right. It's maybe not too different from a school bus pickup and drop off. Most of our clients, they live in senior apartments, these major senior apartments. So pickup and drop off is somewhat smooth. The apartment complex itself provides us the areas where we could safely pick them up and drop them off.
Bruce Klein, again?
Yeah, just one more question. I believe, I'm thinking that your service receives funding, federal, state funding, whatever, and that these individuals qualify based on a licensed caregiver giving the green light, something along those lines?
That's correct, sir. The eligibility is a basic Medicaid eligibility, age, income.
You operate other of these facilities elsewhere in the Chicago metropolitan area?
Correct, sir.
How many?
We have 3 at the moment, one in Prospect, one in Chicago, and one in Wheeling.
And how many people go on average to each of those, and how many do you expect to be coming to this one?
At Wheeling, we have about 45 to 50 clients. In Chicago, it's about 20 to 25. And at Mount Prospect, it's about 40.
And this,
And here, we expect about 50 to 75.
the largest of all of them.
Yes, sir.
Is there some change that you'll have to make to your operation to make this larger than the others? Or they
We-
operate fairly similarly?
Yes, sir. IDOA, Illinois Department on Aging, stipulates that we must have enough staff members per our clients. So that would be essentially the only thing that we would have to amend.
And how many buses then to move the 50 occupants per day?
Yes, we expect 3 15-passenger vans.
Okay.
Any commissioners?
What's the ratio of patients or
It's 7 to 1.
7 to 1 to
Yes, sir.
caregivers? Okay, and all the licensed caregivers?
Yes,
all
sir.
Caregivers are licensed, I should say?
Right, they're fully qualified, and we are inspected routinely by the Illinois Department on Aging, and we need to fulfill our certification and be up to date constantly.
And are the meals supplied hot? or-
Yes, sir.
And they're prepared in the kitchen within the facility?
We cater, and even the whole process, that gets inspected routinely. It's gotta be fully dietitian approved menu.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of the petitioner?
One more question.
Yes.
This is being occupied as a not-for-profit facility?
We are a for-profit facility,
For-profit.
entity.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. At this point, we'll ask the staff to give its report.
Okay.
Staff being Mike Wojtek. So Mike, run through the zoning map amendment and then into the special use.
Sure. So the zoning map amendment request is to rezone this property from B1 service commercial to B2 commercial. The use would be allowed with a special use in B1 service commercial as well. However, we're recommending rezoning to B2. We're slowly phasing that zone out. B1 is, the intent of B1 was like a neighborhood shopping district, so very localized services. This building has never really met the intent of that zone, nor has any of the properties to the north, all along Skokie Boulevard on the west side. That's all B1. So we're bringing the zoning into compliance with how it's being used. The property were to be redeveloped, they'd have more flexibility with the design of the structure on the property due to different setbacks, more generous setbacks and heights. And so it's more of a technical cleanup in changing the zoning to a B2 zone. And again, we're slowly phasing out that B1 zoning. I'd like to go on to the special use permit case. Petitioner gave a good description of the day-to-day operation. There's a more detailed analysis and narrative of their operations in the staff report. And I'd like both reports to be accepted as written. I do want to describe several site issues that would need to be modified from the
We'll accept
plan.
the staff's report as written and
Okay.
with your verbal modifications.
I just want to show you a quick example of the buses that they currently use. These are I guess, passenger vans, standard passenger vans. There was uncertainty about the weight of the vehicle that would be stored on site, because once it's over 8,000 pounds, then there's different regulations that kick in. But these are your standard Ford passenger vans, so they're well below that threshold for regulation. On the site itself, I will go into some details on this. There is a public sidewalk that runs across private property along Skokie Boulevard. We're not sure exactly how that was allowed at the time. It was mentioned when the building was built in 1963 that the engineer for the village at that time recommended that that sidewalk be put onto public property. Was never done, so now we are requesting that it be placed onto the Skokie Boulevard right-of-way. That will involve a 12-foot wide dedication to shift the eastern property line over to put the sidewalk into the right-of-way. And prior to this case going for building permits, they would have to supplement or provide us with a plat of dedication for review. Right now, there's several substandard parking spaces on the site. Spaces are 7.5 feet wide in some areas, which can barely accommodate a car. We're requesting that modifications be made to curbing in these areas over here to allow for standard 9-foot wide parking spaces to meet our current code requirements. This will probably result in the petitioner having to take this curb and extend it inward toward the existing structure. The problem is more in the north parking lot than the south parking lot, but they'll need to adjust some curbing to accommodate those dimensions. We're requesting that the wheel stops be removed from the backs of the parking spaces along the west side of the property. There will be a curb there already, and the wheel stops will further reduce those parking spaces, so we want to make sure that the cars get as far away from the alley as possible. They're widening the sidewalk along the west side of the building in order to accommodate for that vehicle overhang, plus have room for passengers to exit the vehicles and go over to the entrance. This building is shared by Thresholds right now. Thresholds is a social assistance center for people with mental disabilities and like addiction recovery. That's mainly in office use. Most people at that site travel off-site to provide services, so there's not a large amount of their clients coming in. Occasionally they'll come in for computer training. So the parking demand is not very high for either use. It'll be mainly employees of these businesses, and everybody else would either be bussed in, occasionally be driven by a relative or a spouse, especially for Thresholds instance. And with the MedTech, it will be all buses for the visitors to the center. We are requesting that a landscape plan be provided for the site. There's a decent amount of tree canopy available at the site right now, but we'd like it to be supplemented with some new landscaping to just add some variety on the site. And so a landscaping plan would need to be provided before this goes to the Board of Trustees meeting. The parking requirement is met. They are required to have 31 spaces, and they will be able to accommodate 31 spaces. They can achieve this by eliminating this second handicap loading space. State code has changed recently, and they can now share one common loading area, so we can free up that for another parking space. So they will be right at the requirement for parking for the entire facility. I believe that's all.
Okay, any questions of staff?
Of course.
Yes.
Mike, where's the bus loading and unloading?
They would be loading and unloading back here.
Off the alley?
Yeah, the entrance, the main entrance to the building is off the alley here. So there is a striped loading area for the vehicles to park. They would also be able to park in any of these spaces.
But they would pull up sideways to the building, unload, and then park in one of their other assigned spaces.
That's fine.
Where's the overnight parking? I guess that's the other question. Where's the
Bus
loading and
parking.
unloading, and where's the overnight
Bu-
bus parking?
Bus parking would be behind the building, is that my understanding? So it would be along the west side of the building. They would keep the buses there overnight, the three vans, passenger vans.
How is the ownership described in the thresholds? I thought was an owner and not-for-profit. That's why I was asking the not-for-profit questions earlier, and it has to do with taxing. So who owns what part of the building, who is going to own the future building, and who is or is not going to pay taxes on which portion of the building?
I don't know if 7400 Skokie Boulevard LLC is a tax exempt entity or not.
It says it is in the report here of the petitioner, where they say
does
they're going to
say.
share the building with a not-for-profit entity.
Well, the north half of the building was a doctor's office at one time, so the taxes are being paid on the property, and my belief is that they're leasing to a nonprofit on the south side and a for-profit on the north side. So the property is taxable right now, because there have been taxable occupants there before.
Okay?
It was a pediatric office, like a back office, most recently on the north end.
And neither occupant then is going to be an owner. The owner continues to be whoever the
This-
owner was previously, and both of these uses are
Yes,
tenants.
this LLC, the 7400 Skokie LLC is the current owner, and to my knowledge, will continue to be the current owner. And they're petitioning on behalf of MedTech.
Okay?
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mike. Sir, would you come back up? So you heard the staff report, and you heard the comments from the Plan Commission. Do you have anything else to offer? Or comments?
No, sir. I mean, only thing I would say is that our industry is just simply growing. There are so many research that shows that when seniors could socialize, we could keep them independently, living healthy independently. That actually saves all of us money and keeps them much happier.
Yeah. Good luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, is there anybody in the audience who has a comment or question on these two cases? Please come up. Okay. No comments, no questions? Okay. Therefore, I'll move for motion to, oh, I'm sorry. Jeff Berman, do I have a second? Second, Cindy, thank you. Franklin, okay. Call for vote on the zoning map amendment. Commissioner Mitchell? Aye. Commissioner Klein?
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman?
Aye.
Commissioner Villegas?
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin?
Aye.
Commissioner Lex Potty is absent. Commissioner Jeff Berman? Aye. Commissioner Matei is absent, and I'll vote aye. In case 2020-02, that this is the special use for the same location. Excuse me, do I have a motion? Scott Berman, do I have a second? Jeff Berman, thank you. Call for vote, Commissioner Mitchell. Aye. Commissioner Klein.
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman.
Aye.
Commissioner Villegas.
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin.
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman. Aye. And I'll vote aye. Motion passes. Again, sir, these cases still have to be approved by the Board of Trustees, and you'll be notified when the cases go before them. And good luck to you, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next cases are related. Is petitioner here for the next case? Excuse me. We're going to listen to cases 2019-47P, which is a zoning map amendment, 48P, which is site plan approval, 49P, which is the parking determination, and 50P, which is a special use permit. I'd like to comment on case 2019-49P, the parking determination. In parking determination, the Plan Commission is the final determining body, and so we will make the decision on parking tonight. In that case, will not go before the board for final vote. Sir, with the permission, we're going to present all 4 cases together, is that?
Yes,
meet
with
your-
your permission. Thank you.
Okay. So, can you name and address, please?
Mark Gershon, 521 Jackson Avenue in Glencoe.
Okay, and your relationship to the petitioner?
I am the attorney for the petitioner.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Please,
Great,
go ahead.
thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, is the notice in order for this, for these, all 4 cases?
All 4 cases, notice is proper and correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Luke.
Would you
members-
speak into the
Oh,
microphone,
sure.
please?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. Chairman Luke, members of the commission, it's always a pleasure to be back in Skokie. And very pleased to present this project this evening. I think it's, as you're going to find out, it's really an exciting project, bringing some great services to the community. And also, as you'll find out, some great revenues as well. Brief overview, it's properties at 3412 West Toohey Avenue. We'll go over the location in a second from that. Here you get a sense of it. Our property is right up here in green. And what you'll see when we get to the property is this is an existing building. Currently is a mix of manufacturing tenants on the building, and this property is seeking rezoning of the southernmost portion of the building to the B2 district in order to allow for this use. You'll get a sense of the overall zoning and the history of the project while we go through it. With me this evening is Ari Schulman and other representatives of Terrace Ayala, the not-for-profit group that owns this property and is presenting the community center. Javier Milan, who many of you know with KLOA, our traffic engineer. Scott Goldstein with Tesca Associates, who will give a quick presentation on why there are significant economic benefits from this project. And Ross Duncan with DR Design and Architecture, who are here for any questions.
Okay, before we go any further, will these members of your party, will they be coming up to testify? Or
Yes.
just-
Do you want to swear us all in at once?
Please, could you have them stand up, please? Do you all affirm that the testimony you give tonight is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you? I do. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Mark, could I ask you to do one thing before you
Sure.
start? And that's, with your finger, just indicate to us which building. I drove around in that area
Oh,
back
sure,
there, and I was
sure.
trying to identify it, and I couldn't quite.
There's a laser pointer there
That's right.
somewhere.
Oh, is this better? Can you see the mo?
Either way,
Oh, here. Is this one of the ones that works well on a PowerPoint?
Just don't hurt yourself.
You just,
who knows?
I won't because I can't turn it on. It's good.
Turning it, maybe?
Oh, it's working.
Is it? Good. Got it. Oh, you got to hold it. That's fine. All right. So our property is, the overall building is right here. And again, we've got some pictures. We'll get much closer in on it. And the portion of our project we're talking about is right here. And one of the things you'll see in the overall presentation is that part of this project is the way that all the uses will synergistically work together. Part of that is already happening. It's the fact that we have tenants who are generating revenue, which enables the entire not-for-profit project to move forward. And we'll go a little bit more through the different projects as we go along.
Okay.
But just to go over again, we are seeking a zoning map amendment from the M3 district to the B2 district, a special use permit for a civic, social, and fraternal organization, and a parking determination to enable good planning and use of the parking area by these 2 compatible uses. In order to allow this to occur, because your zoning code doesn't typically provide for shared parking, because you don't have uses like this that often have such different use at the time of the building, we're asking for 4 different reliefs from your code. The first is control of off-street parking to allow for valet parking that will use some of the parking aisles we have on the property. The control of off-site, I apologize, and also that will allow for parking outside of what is striped for its use for commercial uses, and we'll walk through that. Control of off-site parking to allow a temporary parking agreement instead of a covenant on the land for off-site parking on an as-needed basis. What you're going to find out from our presentation is there may be 2 or 3 or 4 events a year where we actually have to potentially could go to off-site parking if we needed to do that. And so we want to have that available. And obviously, tough to get someone to give you a permanent agreement when you can't really tell them if you're ever going to use their property at all. The collective use of parking spaces to allow the community center to use the parking space required for spacing for the industrial tenants in the evenings and weekends when those tenants are not on the property. And as Javier will talk, he's been out there, checked it, there simply is no one parking there in the evening and on the weekends, and that's the primary time we'd be using this property. Lastly is required number of off-street motor vehicle parking. Because we're in the parking determination portion of this, our property doesn't fit squarely within two-year code, because it's not just one large restaurant facility, it's not just one large banquet facility. It's got a large hall, as you'll see, but also a lot of smaller rooms for smaller items. And so working with your staff, we've come up with a ratio of 2.75 seats per car. You'll see from your staff report that your surrounding communities are in the 3 to 5 range of people per car, so we think it's a very good conservative number that we're very comfortable works for the site. We'll be talking about satisfaction of each of the standards throughout the presentation, but at this point, I would ask that our applications, including our written response to each of those requirements, standards, and findings of fact, all the exhibits that we've supplied to the village, this PowerPoint presentation, and I'll leave a copy before I leave, as well as the staff reports and all testimony exhibits to be submitted this evening, be incorporated in the public record for the hearing.
Yes.
Thank you. So, again, just real quick, I think I've talked enough about this, Terciella. You see, you can't have me both run a PowerPoint and talk, because I can't do both at the same time. But again, just talking about our groups, which you've already seen, the rezoning, these special use, and each of our reliefs being requested. So again, zooming in a little bit more to where we are here, but this is talking somewhat about the history and trend. And here we're talking about the comprehensive plan and what's happened in this area. Your comprehensive plan shows this area for industrial, but in fact, what's happened in the area, some of which is in your community, some of which across the street is not in your community, but essentially we very clearly have an area that's been developing with commercial and retail uses along Toohey Avenue. Lowe's back in 2002 to 2004. Walmart, Mariano's, Bank of America, 2013 to 2015, and a lot of other uses surrounding those. And again, just to get a sense, our property is turn around here, is right here, is our property. I promised you a closer map. Here to get a sense. And since 2018, you can really get a sense of what's going on in this area, and why we believe that this is an appropriate use and what we're surrounding and adjacent to. Your comprehensive plan beyond that also is very supportive of this type of use. You specifically say that arts, entertainment, and recreational uses are generally in commercial zoning districts, but can be in residential and industrial zoning districts. So even though we're rezoning it because the use isn't permitted in your industrial, you contemplate that this is an appropriate use in those types of areas. And talk a lot about the benefits and positive natures. I think Skokie is known for this, the kind of cultural community you have, the social network, and what associations and nonprofits do to support services in many areas. And what you're going to find out here is, yes, this is supporting the Skokie community, and that's critically important, but you're also supporting a larger community that is currently not being supported in this area. And you're going to be surprised to find out that many of these people have to fly to New York to have their family weddings because there's nothing in the area. Obviously, that's hard on families. We'll talk about that. It's also hard economically on this community because when people in Skokie and surrounding Skokie are taking their large events somewhere else, not that it's all about money, but that also means they're taking the revenues from those events somewhere else. And that's why we think this provides for a much greater ability on it. Just quick on our site plan, and this plan, just so we're clear, north is in this facing to the right side of the plan. Unit A is the property we're talking about. B, C, D, and E are currently occupied by industrial tenants. And the reason we show the whole thing is that while our rezoning essentially goes right along the building line here for this property, the reason we have the entire site involved is because we cover the entire property in terms of parking, et cetera, and mixed use on that. just to sense the renderings, there's not a lot of changes being made to the building on the exterior, some very significant changes on the interior. Just to get a good sense of the floor plan, here you start to see that one large hall, as I mentioned. There's a smaller multipurpose room here, and then a number of rooms around the area. There's a lot of different uses of this building. As we said, I think all of you know the JCC, having moved out of the area, there are a lot of Jewish community events that currently don't have an easy home. And yes, probably the biggest events here, and the one you'll see mostly in our report, are the weddings, the bar mitzvahs, those types of events. We're clearly going to have a big event in the center, but this also is set up so you can have a smaller class here, so that you can have other, a larger speaker or someone else coming in this location. But a critical part of this that your staff pointed out, and then honestly, we would have never run it any other way, is that when you've got the largest size events here, it has to be a run-of-the-house event, right? If you're holding a 500-person wedding in this building, you can't come in and find out that there's also a study group going on down the hall. And part of that's just as a practicality, because you've got a bride's room here, you have a groom's room. This room is likely where you might have the ketubah ceremony, where you might have some other part of it. And so it's all designed that way, but all the kitchen improvements are over here. But during the week, when our occupancy is much smaller because we don't have the other parking there, during the week, you may have classes here, you may have other types of events. And to be very clear, while this was designed as a not-for-profit, it's part of the Jewish community, it's also open to the community, so that other community groups that are looking for spaces will also have the ability to use this, and we hope that they will. Just a sense, and you'll see more of these later, a sense of the kind of build-out we have on this. There's a lot of real thought put into making it a real quality area. And at this point, before I go any farther, I want to ask Ari Shulman with Terrasiala to give you a sense of the background behind this building and why they put all their time, effort, and money into making it happen.
Well, good evening, welcome to the meeting, and glad to see you again.
It's good to see you, Paul. It's good to see everybody. Thank you, Mark. I feel an honor to talk to everybody on the zoning board finally, but we got here. It's really an exciting project for the Jewish community. I've been involved with a lot of the Jewish organizations for the past 30 years, ran the day school, involved with the synagogue as a profession. I'm a developer in Skokie, and in the last 5 or 6 years got involved in a warehousing business, and we're based right here in your backyard, work closely with the village. The need for the Jewish community is there's really very few places that a family can go today to make a wedding, a bar mitzvah, and the community's been growing over the last numerous years. So when you have 350, 400 people, the closest place that people go to today is in North Lake, Illinois, which is a 45, 50-minute drive. In the last 6 months, I must have had 19 or 20 weddings that I had to fly to New York. It means you pick yourself up, either you or your wife go, you can't both go, it's not fair to the family. You're going for a day and a half, you lose out family time, you lose out business time, and there's a cost associated with it. That's as a participant, and how many friends and families don't have the ability to have their families at their weddings. And it's really not fair to the community as a whole. When a girl grows up in this community and spends primitive years going to the day schools and living in a community that they have to pick up and on the most important day of their life and go to New Jersey and live in somebody's basement for 3 days to prepare for the wedding and get everything done, and the family has friends and family. So it's been an inconvenience that we've created because of the size of the families and because of the growth of the Jewish community, and there really is nowhere that's cost effective for a wedding to take place. That's on the personal level. Besides the personal level, there's also a communal level, is that when we want to get together and have a community events, there really isn't a Jewish community center. As Mark mentioned, the JCC closed down. There's really nowhere to have the larger events. And that's what the goal of this building is. This building is tucked away in an industrial area. It butts up against the building. There's really no residential around there. We have ample parking. We're a little bit off the beaten track is where we want to be, so that we're not in anybody's eye in today's day and age. A Jewish community center. We really would like to keep signs off it. Just it's a destination location. You know where you're going, and that's the goal of this project. This is 5 people that have gotten together, bought this as a non-for-profit. The building is currently owned as a non-for-profit. Ateras Ayala owns the building, and as Mark said, our goal is to take off the tax roll, the portion that's going to be used as a community center, the rest will be paying tax. Economically, in today's day and age, to make this work, you need the financial income of the other tenants to make a non-for-profit work. And last but not least, the name Ateras Ayala, the word Ateras in Hebrew means a crown. And Ayala was my daughter who passed away tragically in a car accident 5 years ago. My wife and I are honored that the committee has decided to call this after my daughter, who didn't have a wedding, that other people can have joy, and it's really going to be something that we're proud of. So I really ask the committee we've spent a tremendous amount of time going through it. We're open to questions, and we hope that we're going to get approval tonight. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Ari. I'm going to ask Javier to come up and talk about traffic.
Sorry. Well, that's okay.
Please give us your name for the record, please.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Javier Milan. I'm a principal of KLOA Incorporated. We're in Rosemont, 9575 West Higgins Road. And we were retained to conduct the traffic and parking study for the proposed development. We conducted this traffic and parking study following all industry guidelines. One of the things that I really want to point out from the beginning is that given the nature of the proposed community center, traffic will be generated outside of the peak hours of the adjacent street. What do I mean by that? As you heard, most of these activities occur at 6 p.m. on. Traffic, and you know it because you drive it, it's heavy 7 to 9 in the morning, people going to work, and 4 to 6, that's people coming back home from work. So just by looking at that, you have good synergy. When one starts speaking, the other one is going down. Access to the facility is going to be provided by the existing access points that are serving the area, so no new access points, no new curb cuts. And as part of the traffic study, we have to count intersections. We need to know what's out there. Based on the traffic counts, when this facility will peak, traffic in the area is about 35 to 45% lower than what it would normally be, let's say 4 to 6 or 7 to 9. Once again, good synergy, which is one of the most positive things about this land use. In order to analyze future conditions, we need to, oops, so sorry. Like Mark, I cannot do 2 things at the same time, so I apologize. So in order to analyze future conditions, we need to apply some growth factors to the area. So we actually, all the consultants need to contact the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning to get those. Those are the factors that are provided to either the county, the municipalities, so everybody's using the same thing. So we increased the traffic volumes on McCormick Boulevard by 1.7%, on Tui by 2.7% to represent 2024. Why 2024? We shouldn't be analyzing things on a vacuum. Things are going to happen that we're not aware of, a new development or something, so you need to include some growth in the area. Once we have those base volumes, you add the side traffic, and then you have what we call the total traffic volumes. And then we analyze the intersections. How are they going to operate? So based on the results of the capacity analysis, the existing access system will be sufficient to accommodate the new traffic that will be generated by the community center. moving along to the parking, which was part of the traffic study too, we did a parking evaluation. And to do that, well, we have to go out there and do a parking occupancy survey. We went on a weekday, and we counted the number of vehicles parked in the surrounding parking field from 4 to 6 p.m. and also on Saturday from 6 to 9 p.m. One of the observations that we had is that parking demand in those adjacent parking fields diminishes significantly after 4 p.m. And that's because those adjacent businesses that are in that multi-tenant building are done for the day, so the parking demand drops down significantly, and that's why I said there's good synergy. This is something that you really want to have. When one goes up, the other one goes down. By code, the overall site should provide 192 parking spaces, and that was shown in the plan that was provided to the village. And then we also looked at how many spaces should be allocated or provided for those uses that are already on site. Based on the Village of Skokie, the required number of spaces for those existing uses is 55. It was mentioned that, and it's true, we're looking or requesting a relief for collective use of parking spaces. And to that, I wanted to add some additional thoughts, and Mark touched on those. The requested relief from the zoning ordinance as it relates to control of off-street parking and the collective use of parking spaces is based on best parking practices. As planners and engineers have recognized and agreed that it is not smart, or you shouldn't design a roadway for the peak hours because it is not appropriate and not in the best interest of the community, of any community. The same thing is applied to parking. And what do I mean by that? So in order to reduce the construction of a, for lack of a better word, sea of asphalt, you actually look at what is the best way to utilize that parking. Otherwise, you build a sea of asphalt for something that happens once, twice, 3 times a year, and then after that, you have more impervious surface for 365 days a year that it's not helping anybody. So collective use of parking spaces is a very smart way of utilizing your existing resources, what you have in there. Specifically, when 2 or more land uses have different peaking characteristics and different hours of operation. In our case, as I mentioned, and given the nature of the proposed community center, most of the activities will occur outside of the regular hours of operation of the adjacent businesses. And as such, it provides for excellent synergy between the land uses without encroaching on each other. Lastly, beyond that, and if there is additional need for parking, many communities throughout the Chicagoland area have applied effectively the use of valet services, especially with land uses like this. This allows, again, for more efficient utilization of the adjacent parking area without creating more asphalt or additional trips if you have to go to a remote off-site location and then somebody needs to drive you back. Again, trying to be smart in how to reduce the impact in the area. So, oops, sorry, Mark. Can you, oh, here we go. Oh, sorry, I'm going.
I think, hold on.
I
You
got
get
it. Yeah, I got it. So after I have said all that, is what's the parking or the estimated parking demand of this development? How do we go about that? So assuming a 700 maximum occupancy, which is what I was, the information that was given to me, that will only occur once, twice, or maybe 3 times a year. The majority of these events are going to be 400 people or less. We collectively at KLOA, we have surveyed many community centers, banquet facilities, similar uses. And this is in Rolling Meadows, Palatine, Schaumburg, Hoffman Estates, Des Plaines. So we have seen that the typical vehicle occupancy is 2.75 passengers per vehicle. Why is that? You might have a car that has 1, you might have a car that has 4 passengers. So when you collect everything, you get that average occupancy. So, and one thing that I actually found, thanks to staff, what we have found is actually very consistent, or a little bit more, I guess you can say, conservative than what other communities do. So I feel very comfortable with our findings through the years. So applying that, we actually created 3 tables, 3 different scenarios. The first one here is what I call the daytime event, which Mark alluded to is like the smaller gatherings, if you are using one of the rooms for a class or something. Again, there's 192 spaces, permanent parking spaces by code, and then 55 of those spaces are for the adjacent land uses. So if we do the subtraction in there, you have 137 spaces that are left or available for the community center. If we apply what we found, the 2.75 people per vehicle, the maximum attendance inclusive of staff, if you have somebody that is serving coffee or so forth, 376 attendees during a daytime event without encroaching on anybody else. Second scenario would be a nighttime or weekend event. That one, like we mentioned, at night, 6, 7, all of the parking spaces are available. So 192 spaces, that would give you a maximum attendance of 528 people. And the third one, which is the biggest one, that one that will happen maybe once, twice, 3 times a year. What we did, and I'm gonna say, we looked at a plan that BR Design prepared, and they're providing parking on some of the areas that were striped, like corner islands, because nobody's is there. By doing that, you can get 225 parking spaces, because you're maximizing, or you're using the whole length of the aisle. We also look, well, what else can be done if needed? And we prepare a diagram that you could provide an additional 38 valet parking spaces in the aisles, if needed. When you add those two, you have a total number of parking spaces of 263. That gives you a maximum attendance of 700. Staff actually made their own calculation, and it came very close to ours. They came to an attendance of 693. So we are in agreement with staff, because 693, 700, we are right there. So we were very comfortable when we saw the staff came up with pretty much the same thing that we came up with our analysis. So to conclude my remarks, and I'm sorry, I went, the proposed 192 parking spaces that are always going to be there delineated, those can accommodate an event up to 528 occupants, and again, that will be at night when the other businesses are done for the day. Whenever there's an event of more than 528, as we mentioned in the traffic study, valet service will be needed. And based on those scenarios that I gave you, it can be, you can accommodate more than 528 and all the way up to 700 or 693 if we're going to use staff numbers, and I have no problem using that either. So lastly, and if you want me to, I can show it, or if you guys have them, we wanted to make sure that if we do valet, like we mentioned on the aisle, an emergency vehicle traverse. It's very important. So we prepare some auto turn runs, with an emergency vehicle to see whether they could actually maneuver, and they can. So we feel comfortable that if additional valet parking spaces are provided in the aisles, an emergency vehicle can actually traverse through those. So any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Question.
Yes.
So whenever the occupancy goes to a certain number, 528 or 700, then the valet is provided for all. It's a mandatory valet because you switch the parking from self-parking to all valet. Is that correct?
Go ahead. You want to?
It's actually not all valet, but there's a significant portion of the lot that is
Correct.
valet. There are signs there. The area will be blocked off from both directions. There is some of the parking that is not valet parking, but that whole area is reserved for valet.
And by doing it that way, you can still cram in the extra cars on the parking islands in that valet portion, that
Right.
designated valet portion.
And to avoid a little bit of confusion there, parking islands is probably the correct term. What we're all talking about is the striped areas where trucks turn around during the day. These aren't like built-up islands or anything else. And one of the conditions staff recommended, which we completely agree with, is that area can only be parked in those areas by a valet. And those of you who've worked with valets, and I've done those on a lot of festivals on grass and at other locations, they'll have no problems parking where they actually have straight lanes, areas where stripes would be, et cetera.
Understood. Okay.
Mr. Quinn?
Sorry, Jeff.
I'm sorry, Jeff.
On the parking, I'm talking about human behavior here. For a big event, valets being offered, things are getting slow, it's a slower process. And so there'll be a temptation, I think, for vehicles to park on any particular street parking that might be available. But I'm also gathering from your remarks that there's really no parking during, at a time when this banquet hall has demand. Like this synergy you're talking about.
That's what I feel comfortable with. because
So
of the
even though
service.
we don't officially allow street parking, it's going to happen, we can't control for it. I just want to make sure that if it does happen, it's not burdensome on any particular business. Your comments?
You want me to address them? No. I feel very confident that anything is possible, and I will say that. People are going to do whatever they want, but because that synergy that I kept on talking about, most people like to park as close as possible to where I'm going. Very few people will say, I'm going to park on, and I'm trying to remember, St. Louis, which I think it's the one to the west, if I remember correctly, and then go down and cross, and then go through the Export Fitness and go in. Very unlikely. I mean, I wouldn't do it because I want to be as close as possible. And if I couldn't find the parking spot, then I'm going to valet because I do not want to walk that distance. So very unlikely that will happen. Is it possible? Anything is possible, and I will agree with you. But I don't feel that that's going to happen because of what I mentioned to you. All those parking spaces are available. If you have a bigger event, you can even provide more parking via valet. So very unlikely that that will happen. So I'm very comfortable with the numbers.
And part of that is just a reminder is, we're talking about a very small number of the events. The larger events is far more likely to be occurring on the weekends, Saturday night, Sunday. For the average event here, there's adequate on-site parking with no valet, and we don't see it as being an issue. We really believe we're talking about 2, 3, maybe 4 events a year where we would have that kind of coverage.
Mr. Berman?
So for the bigger events, and maybe I misunderstood, but it seems like it's implied that the neighbor parking is going to be used. We talk about some of the buildings that they'll be closed when your peak times?
No.
No?
You want to?
No, when we talk about parking, which is why it may become a little confusing, parking on the neighbors, that's all on our property. There are 4, if you remember that drawing I had up here, there are 4 units there. All of their parking is available to this, so we would all be parking in that area.
So there's no anticipation about other businesses giving up their parking or allowing it in the evenings?
Well, I want to put it.
Other than on that one plot of land?
Yeah.
One of the things we did put in here was our hopes that we'd also be allowed, should we move forward and find shared parking with someone else, that we could have shared parking with an adjacent property. We don't need it. We can do it all with valet, but certainly in the future, if you've got that larger event, if you're running into that problem that's out there, we would talk with some of our neighbors about potential for shared parking.
Okay.
But no expectation of using anyone else's parking other than our own, and it's not needed.
All right, thank you.
So we're all working off of a common template. Atala owns then, or will own, the entire building that's described in one of your diagrams as Unit A, B, C, D, and E. So the entire building is owned by Atala. Only Unit A is the one being used as the community center. B through E are the tenant occupants who will be mostly day use only, and that's why we have the access to the entire parking area.
Couldn't have said it better
Couldn't have said it
myself.
better, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And by the only correction there, Terrace Ayala already owns the entire property, and has control of it, which is how they're able to make that happen.
So back, and then, this isn't a parking question, but just further to clarify, so then the Atala owns the entire building, the for-profit uses are B through E, are all of the current for-profit uses, they will continue, and the not-for-profit section is only the Unit A that's to be the community center.
Exactly. That's also the only portion of it. I can go back to a site plan if it's easier, but also the only portion that we're seeking to rezone. The rest will remain with the current zoning. It's only that portion that would be rezoned.
Any other questions?
I'm going to have him just give a fast presentation by Scott of how the dollars work here, because while I truly appreciate the support that Skokie gives to nonprofit uses and social uses, this is one of the ones where surprisingly it will generate significantly more revenue for the village than it does right now.
Good evening, I'm Scott Goldstein. I'm a principal at Teske Associates. We're based out of Evanston, and pleasure to be here tonight. And as Mark said, that it is our determination it will have a very positive financial impact on the village. The hall will provide a community facility that will enable weddings and community events that will be heavily catered. The methodology that we used was to project the change in property taxes to the village of Skokie, as we mentioned that a portion of the building would be nonprofit. But right now, the property taxes are quite low on the property, so there'd only be a loss of between $2,200 and $4,500 in property taxes, but would be much more made up with in terms of food and beverage, which would bring in approximately $46,000 annually by the third full year of operations, rising to approximately $73,000 in taxes by year 10. In addition, we assumed a portion of the hotel, I think 40% of the projected hotel, to be within the village of Skokie, which would bring in another $34,000 a year. The net present value over the next 10 years projected to be $482,000. So a very small amount of money would be reduced in property taxes, would be much more made up with in terms of food and beverage and hotel.
Thank you.
So just very quickly, I'm obviously happy to go through them, but I know you well enough, you won't want me to. But we're happy to go through if you have any questions on the standards. But again, you've got a written response in each of our standards. You also have a staff report that addresses how we've gone through each of those and how they've seen those as well. And again, we request the rezoning, the special use, the site plan approval, as well as the 4 items of relief I identified before. And again, sort of, excited at sort of the benefits of this property. You've already heard, the first time I heard this project, the owners came into the meeting with me with a stack of the invitations to weddings of their neighbors where they had to go out of state. I didn't honestly know this existed or occurred. And it also enriches the community, not just theirs, which is critically important, but the overall community, that we're bringing these life cycle events here. And also that we're bringing back some Jewish community and overall community social space that works very well from that. And again, very pleased that we do that by raising tax revenues for you rather than reducing them, and keeping their spending in the community, that hotel spending, et cetera. With that, we're going to close our presentation. We're obviously happy to respond to any questions you have, and I'll turn it over to your staff.
Okay, you're more than welcome to come up and rebut after the staff gives us the report. Okay, Mark?
Thank you.
Can we back this up?
Sure.
Can we just use your site plan?
Of course.
Yep.
Staff report will be presented by Matt Brandmeier.
How do I get this to the overall screen?
Maybe right click and then.
Just
The site plan, right.
Yeah.
It's messy.
We're trying to go back on this.
And show maybe here.
It's messy.
Where's the little thing that shows me all the slides?
It is.
Ah, you're hiding that from me.
Where the old railroad right away used to be. That's why it's all screwed up back there.
No, you went the wrong way.
I did?
Yeah, there are
There's a
extra
lot
slides.
more, huh?
Yeah, slides we don't use unless you have questions on the standard.
Okay.
Interfere with, which is what I'm so relaxed about. That's why there's no neighborhood, there's no, anybody that can complain on the tenants, B, C, D, and E, those
Yeah.
are tenants, and they're not complaining.
So my name is Matt Brandmeier. I'm the Community Development Director. I think Mark already introduced the reports, the staff reports, into the record, but just to back up and be sure, I'd like to ask that you accept the staff reports, including the rezoning report, the special use permit report, the parking determination report, and the site plan report into the record.
So granted.
With that said, I'm going to forego a longer presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think Mark did a good job of explaining the larger issues. I do want to point out a couple things I didn't hear. One is that the landscaping on this site is going to be restored. I think the previous user had removed the landscaping because of a security issue. So I didn't hear that during the presentation. Secondly, in regard to the valet plan, we are asking for essentially an operations plan to be submitted and approved prior to approval by the village board. And what I mean by that is we want to know the exact details as far as how cars are coming in, how they're going out, what kind of fencing or signage or, you know, the access for emergency vehicles and all of that. And we're asking that to be part of one of the conditions of approval. I will note in the staff report, there are a couple of changes that we made prior to the meeting, they're minor changes just to bring to your attention. And this would be in the site plan report. There was a condition of approval that required all utilities be buried. I added to make sure that all new utilities, there are no new utilities anticipated. In fact, if you really boil this down, there's not a lot of site changes that are being proposed or anticipated at all. You have the rezoning, you have the special use permit, and then the parking concerns, but overall, this is kind of, it's certainly a change of use, but it's more or less a tenant finish at the end of the day. It's going from one use, from one tenant, it's vacant now, but the previous tenant, to this new, you know, event space that they're proposing. So there's not when it comes down to the site plan requirements and the special use permit, there's just not a lot of change there.
So all the elevations are going to stay the same, which means it won't require an appearance commission review?
Yeah. There's a few minor modifications to, I think, one of the facades, but yeah, there's no other change
And will there be any
proposed.
signage?
Well, they initially discussed that, but it sounds like they're not going to move forward with that now, so. Another one of the requirements in the site plan report was that they were not permitted to park in the drive aisles, but of course, that's one of the matters of relief that they're asking for. So I wanted to be sure that that was removed since, just to be more clear and we didn't run into any conflict. And then the last item, I think there was a mention in the findings of fact of a school, which doesn't exist because I just copied and pasted that over from another report. Also, I wanted to point out, I apologize for the lateness of the reports. It's kind of my first time, you know, writing these, so I know you got them on Tuesday, which was a little late. We'll work very, very hard to get those to you on Friday from here on out. In regard to the rezoning, it is certainly the case that the comprehensive plan, the land use map of the comprehensive plan shows that this is an industrial, essentially an industrial site. Mr. Gershon is accurate when he says that this area is transitioning. I think the bigger point, it's not me, yeah. The bigger point is that, you know, the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2005. There's been a lot of change in the area. On several occasions, we chose to rezone to B2, you know, for the Walmart development, for Mariano's, for the fitness center, and this is another one of those requests. I do think we need to study this area for the future and try to determine what land use mix or what kind of you know, land uses or businesses we want to have in that area overall. But we do have precedent for adopting a change that's different than the land use map in the comprehensive plan. In regard to the special use permit, another thing I didn't exactly hear, but we are providing caps essentially on their occupancy at these different times of the day or different parking scenarios. So at that 2.75, you know, parking multiplier essentially, they can essentially have as many occupants as they can park. So the three scenarios that the applicant was speaking to, one is during the weekday, and that's when the other spaces are needed for the other businesses. They cannot do valet. It's very important that these docks, these loading docks are open and the circulation is free and clear so that they can have trucks come in and out. So during the day, it's a whole different, type of occupancy or number of occupants than on the weekends, nights and weekends, I should say. There's another flat kind of, parking requirement based upon their ability to provide valet spaces. And then if they have, and I think it's very few and far between, as the applicant is describing, that they could potentially do a combination of valet plus some off-site parking if they could find it. They're describing it as a couple of times a year. We will certainly monitor that and be sure it's not disruptive of businesses in the area. There are the four items of relief, which you'll find in the parking determination report. And all of those items essentially have to do with the valet parking. I don't know that our zoning code really contemplates the use of valet parking. So it took a few relief items to get there, essentially. I think the operative, when it comes to the land use, the operative component of this use is that all of the visitors, all of the guests will arrive essentially at one time or within maybe a half hour or an hour of each other. And so, we were extra careful with the parking. It's not like other, types of uses where people will come and go. We initially evaluated it as a restaurant use, which is a 10-to-1, 10 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of space. But in comparing the spaces to, or the land use to a restaurant, essentially your restaurant is double loading because you have people arrive and as they're leaving, other people have already arrived. So it's, you're kind of switching over as you go through the service. So this is a little different. So it took the four relief items to get there as far as, the valet parking and essentially the number of occupants they're expecting. I think that's all the items I have in my report. Yes.
There's a discrepancy from their presentation of that.
Yeah.
You probably discussed that.
Yeah, there is another point that the applicant was mentioning 700 total occupants. I included 750. That was in some of the documentation that we received, but overall, again, it's a function of essentially the number of occupants is based upon the number of parking spaces that they can provide. When they get past that number, that 693 number, which we discussed, which is in the recommended conditions, they're going to have to find off-site parking, or more than likely they're going to have to do that. There is some, vacant land or unused kinds of spaces in that area that they could probably find in order to park any additional vehicles. So that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions of the staff? No?
Okay.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
At this time, I will open up the floor to anyone in the audience who has a comment or question on these cases. Please come up. Anybody? Okay, Commissioner Quinn?
A question on traffic.
Okay.
As Matt illustrated, folks will be arriving pretty much at the same time, especially on the times when you're going to be near the maximum. How are they getting to the site? Is it off Toohey and McCormick?
Oh, yes, Toohey and McCormick. All of those access points, do serve or funnel into. So you have more than one way to get in and out of
Yeah.
McCormick.
Is there, I don't recall, is there a light there at Export?
No, the light is serving Mariano, so it's just a little bit further east
Okay.
of the Export Fitness facility. Mhm.
So might it'll be a little challenging making the kind of turn you want to make to come into from at the export location, like
Yes.
left-hand turns?
Correct. And again, because this happens outside of the peak hours, it's that good synergy that I mentioned. And if you, for some reason, as a driver, feel like, I don't want to make the left out of there because it's difficult, you have the option of going to McCormick, make a right, and then when you get to the signal at McCormick and Tui, you can go left, you can go through, whichever you want.
Yeah, I understand the peak hours that when people aren't working, but they're still getting home, so there's rush hour impact, and there's also weekend, Tui's the Wild West on a weekend. So, just a concern of mine.
Sure.
And for you, I hope.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Berman.
I'm sorry, for traffic again. On nights where the valet's being utilized, the queue, will they be queuing on the property or down the street?
No, if you notice, this is the drop-off pickup area, and we have a valet plan, am I right, Mark? Yeah. So there's a plan, that shows where the valet, which is basically, I'm going to say it to the northern half.
Sure.
So,
So we're trying to figure out why your image is maybe.
I don't know, I did something.
Because strangely, it's not dimmed on the monitor.
Good, keep talking.
Okay.
So here, just keep going as if I'm not here.
So they're not going to be lining up somewhere in here. It's going to be internal, and then they're going to, use star parking, like Mark mentioned, perpendicular. So because of that, it works easier. You don't have this queuing that you were alluding to somewhere else. So everything is going to be internal.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a quick question.
Commissioner Villegas.
Would you be able to point out on the map where off of McCormick the entrance is? Because to go into the export, I only know off of Tui, so I was just curious, like, how they get in through the back end.
Let me go into that. Yeah, that's what I'm going to look for. Earlier.
Right behind.
Am I going the right?
By Mariana?
Yeah, let me go back.
You're going by Starbucks.
Am I going I'm going the wrong way, sorry.
There's kind of a service road back there. Yeah. No, it's
No striping, no lines.
it's not really a thoroughfare.
No, it's there.
So it's like an alley?
No, it serves the industrial park back there.
It's between the parking lot for Mariano's, behind the Starbucks, before the factory that I think is even vacant.
You want to go to the other one?
Yeah.
I think.
The old Sunset Drive in Access Road. That's what I think it is.
Well, see, now everybody knows about the road now.
Secret road.
I know, but this is
You gave it away.
There's also, if you want to, but, you're going kind
That's
of
through
like
Phelps.
zigzagging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have this right over here.
Yeah, that's Sunset
Yeah,
Drive.
you have this right over there. And then from TUI, again, you have Export Fitness, which we talked about, and then you have this one right here. Both of them are on signalized, and that's why I said, it's challenging to make the left, and somebody can decide that I don't want them to do that. They can make a right, and once they get in here, they can make the left or go straight via the signal.
If that's a village street, that one off of McCormick, we could use a little attention to striping, I think.
It's not, they're all private drives.
Yeah.
Oh, are they really? Okay. Mr. Gershon?
Only small piece on this, just to explain the 750 versus 700. 750 is an occupancy number, how many people we could put in the property. The 693, 698.
That's what we.
The 693 is what we can park on site with valet and the number we're looking for. But as staff has recommended, should someone have a larger event for that, and by the way, we already think that's the biggest event we can ever imagine there, that's where we would come to the village and seek a shared parking with someone else.
Do you mind if I?
Sure, go ahead. Commissioner.
And I'm recalling now the 750 figure.
Your microphone.
Oh, 5. Sorry. Recalling now the 750 figure, that was an evaluation of the floor plan and looking at the number of tables, number of seats that they could kind of work into that space altogether. So it's essentially as many people as you can fit into the building, and that's what we were, looking at, so.
Exit ratios, et cetera, et cetera.
Very good.
Again, thank you. We're happy to respond to anything else you'd like, or any other questions.
Good. I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, starting with case 2019-47P, the zoning map amendment at 3412, 3426 Tui. Mr. Jeff Berman.
I make a motion to accept the staff report as presented.
Okay, do I have a second? Second, Commissioner Franklin. Call for the vote. Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
Commissioner Quinn.
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman.
Aye.
Commissioner Villegas.
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin.
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman.
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. In the case 2019-48P, the site plan approval, do I have a motion? Motion by,
Move to approve as
Scott.
submitted.
do I have a second?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Mitchell. No further discussion, call for the vote. Commissioner Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Quinn,
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman.
Aye.
Commissioner Villegas,
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin,
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman. And I'll vote aye. In the case 2019-49P, parking determination. Now, again, as a reminder, the Plan Commission is the final determining body for the parking. This will not need a vote for the, with the Board of Trustees. So, on the parking determination, and I think the number is, what was the number?
693.
Okay.
693.
No, the number that we approved for parking,
Oh,
2.75, okay? Commissioner Mitchell,
I move that we accept the plan as submitted by the staff.
thank you. Do I have a second? Commissioner Jeff Berman, thank you. Call for the vote. Commissioner Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Quinn.
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman.
Aye.
Commissioner Villegas.
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin.
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman. And I'll vote aye. And the special use at 3412 Tui, case 2019-50P. Do I have a motion? Jeff Berman,
I move that we accept the report as presented by staff.
thank you. Do I have a second?
Se-
I heard Cindy. Commissioner Franklin seconds. No further discussion. Commissioner Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Quinn,
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman.
Aye.
Commissioner Villegas.
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin,
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman.
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. Motion passes. I congratulate all of you, and I'm glad that we are coming to a close on this, and this will come to fruition very soon. And, well, I feel good about this, so.
It's a great project.
Thank you. Good project. Thank you very much. Next and final case this evening is case 2019-19P, zoning chapter amendment for short-term rentals. See, while we give a minute while these people.
If you need me to wait, I can get you.
Oh, there you go. Are you gonna have-
What is that?
Yeah, I gotta get
Just a
thing out of here.
quick thing. Steve?
Oh, okay.
What is this thing?
Getting, it's something that, put them on the sidewalk. You'll hear it. Something that you requested.
And you're gonna leave that whole thing with us? Can you email us this? Yeah, so we can upload it. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Congratulations.
Thank you all, have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank
See
you.
you again before the board.
We'll be in touch, thank you.
All right, next case, again, case 2019-19P.
Just
Steve
for the
Marciani.
public record, we are going out of order from the agenda, which is totally fine because I was going to request that anyway. So this is a rehearing of case 2019-19P, which is regarding short-term rentals. You know the history on this. We went through this in 2016. We did it again last July. You had a whole bunch of questions. We responded to your questions. We gave you time to respond back to you. So we're representing the case as we initially presented it, with all of the answers to your questions in the back, for reapproval.
One of the most important things to me that seemed different from other presentations was, it seems as though in this case, as presented tonight, we have said that Airbnb is only permitted where that Airbnb rental space is within the context of an already owner-occupied space.
Yes.
Thereby, not only a single, so just to clarify, a single-family home would only be a bedroom, and a...
1 or 2 bedrooms, yeah.
And a 2-flat or 3-flat building, which was one of our big concerns to be purchased for investment and turned into a hotel, that even in a 2-flat or 3-flat apartment building, the only way that an Airbnb could be rented within that space would not be one of those units freestanding, but only within one of those units, which is already owner
Correct. We
occupied.
do not allow a whole unit rental. A whole unit rental is not a residence. And
And it-
residences are what belong in residential districts.
And is that different from what we reviewed last
No,
year?
it is not. It is exactly the same.
Okay.
Maybe I'm not, my memory's bad these days, but I thought we talked about possibly pushing even a 1 or 2 room rentals under the neighborhood integrity ordinance, that they'd have to get training and they would have to adhere to that ordinance. And maybe I missed it, but I didn't see that was moved to be subject to that ordinance.
So the attachment, which is the section that's going in the regular village code, which we're not reviewing, it's just for reference, which would be adopted at the same time. I think this is proposed. Hold on a second, maybe we
I think you
adopted
just
it.
speak to inspection and not necessarily training because it's short-term.
So currently, anyone who has a tenant has to get training through the neighborhood integrity ordinance, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the answer to that question. I didn't reread all of that Article 22 amendment.
I'm reading it now. It's short-term rental operators should be treated like other rental property owners and be
Bingo.
required to comply with the neighborhood integrity ordinance requirements.
Yes,
So it's
we
number.
did it. There we go.
It's number 2 under what Peter sent us.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Steve, I got a question.
Yes.
Thank you, sorry.
So, how would you, give me the process of how do you imagine the short-term rentals being policed as it relates to parking?
Well, in order to get the okay to do it, you have to have the extra parking space available. So you wouldn't be able to get the occupancy. So you've got to, well, and then we would find out because we would just monitor the sites to find out for the people. We know right now that there are whole home rentals, and we know right now that there are probably people that are not. Right now, currently, the people who have these are subject to the ones that we know about. They are under the neighborhood integrity ordinance, but it would just be continuous monitoring. And probably neighbors notifying us of things, which is how a lot of enforcement happens in this town.
Yeah, for example, someone that decides they're going to try out Airbnb for the very first time, and they put it on the website, and somebody rents it, and then you're notified, I guess, because there's taxes involved.
That's the hope, right? So,
And then you go out there, maybe before, maybe after the rental occurred, who knows, to see what's going on with the parking, whether they got,
yeah,
because driveways don't work. It's got to be a slab or something like that, if I recall.
I mean, ultimately, our issue is, right, so you still have to have the additional parking space. The goal here is that we don't have a whole bunch of these in town, that we want people in our hotels. And we live very densely packed here, and a lot of areas don't even have the proper off-site park or on-site parking, which means you have a lot of already on-street parking. We don't want more people parking in the street. Not every person who uses a short-term rental will be needing a parking space, but the fact that some might is why we put the parking requirement in, just like not every employee drives to work. But we still have a parking requirement that can accommodate that.
So to clarify, so a home that has sufficient parking, like a two-car garage for their residents and a driveway,
They would need one additional legal parking space, which is not tandem. This way.
so it would be more driveway or a slab?
Not
something-
driveway, though.
They can't park in the driveway in
Behind.
front of a garage. That doesn't count as a third parking space.
Okay.
It could be off their alley, potentially, or along the side if there's room. Otherwise, the unit is not fit to have a short-term rental.
Like the homes that don't have garages or driveways and simply park on the street?
Correct. Yes.
They would need a slab or
They
something?
would
kind
need
of-
3 parking spaces to bring that up to code, because we'd be increasing the intensity. So they'd have to come into compliance.
I have 2 questions. One's a follow-up on enforcement, and that is, when we find something that's out of compliance, what physically do we do? Do we contact the Airbnb company? Do we ticket? Do we give a ticket violation that then is reportable to court? How do we sanction that thing that occurred
Yeah,
or is
and
about to occur?
I don't know the answer to that question yet, but I'm sure there'll be a process in place as we start to work through this on the
No,
enforcement
not
side.
yet. We don't have a process. I was going to turn to our, we don't have a process yet.
There may have been, again, this was Peter's case initially, and I'm kind of like picking it up. I mean, Pete did a lot of the research on it after I wrote it the first time. My name is still on the report, but
We can expect it to be similar, though, to other
it would
enforcement.
be the same as other enforcement, either through property standards or through zoning violations, which would generally probably end up in our administrative hearing process.
Okay, then back
The
to
question about complaints or the annual review?
three ways. One is the annual review, one is complaints, and a third is our ongoing monitoring that we think that we're going to have where we're looking at the Airbnb site on some sort of a regular basis, which is neither of the first two, not a complaint or an annual review. So if we're looking at that site and we see something that comes up that's so obviously wrong, we see an address of a single-family home that doesn't have an extra parking space.
Right. We don't always see the address. They're getting
What's that?
more, I'll say stealthy about telling you exactly where these things are. But, since we have really awesome overhead maps now that get updated every 3 months, we can generally locate.
I guess my question isn't so much the ticket to the owner occupant, which I certainly want in the administrative review. It's the contact
platform.
with the Airbnb company. That's
Yeah.
right.
So-
Have we established that, and are we going to establish that contact?
I'm assuming there's already some kind of contact between our finance department as to collect the tax. So we probably already have some relationship, and I apologize for not knowing the exact answer to your question right now.
But then presumably, if we're collecting the tax, it must be assignable to a property. It
Right.
can't be
Yes.
generalized.
So
Overall, I do know that our finance department is monitoring through the Airbnb website.
and other platforms. There's quite a number of these platforms now.
Yeah, exactly what is available out there.
Right.
Okay,
And it
so-
changes, it's not like a regular thing, like there's a hotel built and there's always rooms available in a hotel. Some people are going out of town and then all of a sudden, we're going to do the best we can to monitor this. We're not going to be perfect. But
Okay, and then there's one other question, dissimilar from the others, and that is a question that we all raised here, and that's question and answer 13, where we said, other communities have banned short-term rentals. It should have a question mark, right? And then the somewhat inconsistent answer is, a survey by staff did not reveal any communities that outright banned short-term rentals. But then the next sentence is, Evanston, Libertyville, Park Ridge, Riverside, and Schaumburg do allow short-term rentals. So some do, some don't outright ban them, and some don't regulate them. Our question here at the commission, and again tonight, would be, why doesn't anyone ban them, and why don't we?
well,
What is the reason
so
why?
a ban is an explicit thing that something is not allowed. So technically, right now, we do not allow rooming houses because it's not on our list, right?
Oh, I see, but we haven't outright banned them, we just haven't.
Right, so something isn't, a ban is an explicit, no, you may not do this specific thing. Something, a use not being accommodated, like I don't have, what is it, fat renderers. Like we used to have a use called fat renderers in our industrial zone.
Tannery, okay.
Yeah, or something like that, right? So just because we don't ban tanneries or arbiters or whatever the word is for that, but the fact that it's not on our list means it's not allowed. So it's not a ban, an explicit ban, but that also means that it's not allowed in Skokie.
So by limiting it as we have, we think that we've limited it to a point where it meets our property standards without it being an
So
outright
what we've
ban.
chosen to do is regulate it under certain circumstances which we feel does not have a negative impact on the neighbors in those residential districts. And being taxed as a house, which was my other big bugaboo, that they're not paying the commercial property taxes, which puts them at competitive advantage. It would also make house costs the same as a commercial property with that revenue stream, which is not.
Jeff and I were concerned about particularly 2 flats and 3 flats.
Right.
That would be
No,
particularly
that would be,
high
for us,
turnover
that's
rental.
considered whole home rental, a
Right.
whole unit rental, and we do not want whole unit rentals. That's a hotel.
But the last question then, why doesn't anyone ban them and why don't we?
I don't want to speak about why other people do
Why
or
don't
don't
we?
do
Why,
things.
as you reviewed this, why did we decide not to ban them entirely? Was that a staff decision? Was it a legal decision? Or
This is our consensus position.
that it should be this way rather than a ban? Yes?
I don't think it's unreasonable to regulate first before you get to that level.
Part of the regulatory function is to define it, and I think, this approach takes the whole idea that they're just renting space for some period of time, that, I now have a roommate for a week or a weekend. It takes that argument out of it, and that's kind of, people have the right to lease or rent out, space in their property, just, to have a roommate or something like that, but by defining it, giving it the, the term, the length of time.
I mean, a lot of what we do with zoning is about reasonable accommodation of, what we these discussions that you guys never hear when we're in our meetings going through all these theoreticals. It's like, okay, so you've got a teenage kid and they have their friends sleeping over, whatever, every so often, or what, how is that different than someone who's getting an Airbnb couch, which is possible, I guess.
But
So,
to your point, I mean,
or
you
people
said
have
they-
visitors visiting them, but there's a big difference between that and having someone you don't know, don't have any control over their behavior, no relationship with, staying at your house, or on multiple different people throughout the year next to someone who has some kind of reasonable intent to be enjoying their home in whatever building type it is. So, I mean, there are bans, private bans in condominiums and others, like my townhome association specifically does not allow us to have any kind of short-term rental in any of the 21 units. So there is private regulation of this, and our condominium, when I lived in the condominium, had the same thing. They added that to the bylaws because there were security concerns, all these other things.
But it's going to happen anyway, even if you ban it, to your point, to go stealthy. I mean, maybe not in your townhouse complex, but within the villages at large, they're going to do it.
And we'll find about
We're better
that.
off having regulations and try and get them to,
Right,
as
at
many
least-
as we can, to come forward and make us aware.
Right
of
now,
the
we
fact
don't have anything, well, we passed the tax, but we haven't passed the ordinances that allow the regulation of the uses, so.
Once it passes, are you going to contact all these people on these sites? Because there are several.
I know, and that's, the thing is finding them, because you put different dates in and different things pop up, and we found a whole bunch of illegal apartment conversions in people's basements, like, I don't know, getting to this, it's just, there's a whole bunch of unsafe things going on,
I
so.
was on Airbnb and there's so many, and then there's VRBO has several too, and it's just, they're just a lot. I didn't realize there were so many already popping up.
There are, particularly in the northeast part of town.
Also downtown.
Yes, and many of those might be whole home right now. I mean, I was in a unit on Michigan Avenue where that Sky Bar is, that new Sky Bar that's all hip and trendy, and our friends and their daughter, they rented the place for her 50th birthday, and they had a family gathering in this place, and they got a whole corner apartment for the weekend. I'm sure there are a lot of units that are doing that, which then takes units out of the housing market for us, drives up the cost of rental housing, et cetera, so.
One last question about enforcement, which we were on earlier. Who is in charge of enforcement? Police? The housing inspectors? Certainly not the planning department.
It'd be property standards.
It's probably property standard. In chapter 22, I'm trying to remember what chapter 22 was. What's the whole title of chapter 22? Yeah, so our building, our community development is in charge of Chapter 22.
So how many property standards inspectors do we have now in the village?
3.5.
3.5, yeah.
And,
And a temporary person.
but we said that they're not the ones that are going to be checking the Airbnb sites or the different sites. It's going to be finance that's going to be checking the sites?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying
Okay.
that right now, we have a tax that we are at least attempting to collect, but we'll work out the details of this once we have something to work out.
Okay.
We'll have an implementation phase.
Yeah.
Right now, finance is just looking at it because, they've identified it as an issue. But we'll take that over at some point.
So we're going to vote on this tonight, presumably.
Yes.
And could you report back to us in a month even, to just tell us how it's going? Not to say that it's complete.
Well, it's not going to be passed in a month, so we have to,
Oh,
got to get to the village
in-
board, and then we got the ordinances
but I
adapted.
particularly-
Give us a little bit of time.
Let's give them
Tell you
90
what,
days.
When I do,
Okay.
no, you know what?
90.
So,
90 days.
I normally do an annual report in the spring.
Yeah.
We didn't do one
Oh,
for
that's
this
right, where
last
you
year because we had
give
this
us
big powwow.
all the different issues,
in the
yeah.
downtown. So, sometime the next time I do my annual review, I can put that in the update. How about that?
good, no time, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to call a special meeting just for that.
No.
All right. Commissioner Berman.
I move we accept the staff report as
Yes.
presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Berman. Because third time's a charm, right? We'll get this all the way.
And I will second it.
All right.
The Berman brothers.
The Berman brothers. You guys should take this act on the road. All right, call for the vote. Commissioner Mitchell. Commissioner Quinn.
You bet. Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman.
Aye.
Commissioner Villegas.
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin.
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman. And I'll vote aye. And we've finally put that one to rest.
All right.
And Steve?
So this last thing
informational-
is just a point of information. This
Okay.
is not part of your official duties. However, our Sustainable Environmental Advisory Commission has been working on its application for a bronze level for Soul Smart, which is a federally funded program that works with municipalities and counties to streamline the process for solar panels. As part of that, they did a review of our zoning ordinance. And in order to get all the points we need to get this bronze, one of the two things we have left are sitting on mine and Matt's shoulders. And one is to present their findings of the zoning thing to the zoning analysis to you. So I am just doing that. You don't have to take any action on this, and that's what I provided to you. But my big thing on this is that there are very few, just like the discussion we were just having about, just because we don't explicitly say that solar panels are allowed, doesn't mean they're not allowed, because we treat them interpretively like we treat antennas and other kinds of accessory structures. So they have some things as high priorities that we have to define it and do this, that kind of stuff. So I will acknowledge the fact that the things that they're listing are not in our ordinance. And I am also acknowledging the fact that, with the exception if someone wants to do an entire solar farm, which is probably not going to happen in this town, there's nothing that is preventing solar panels from going on anyone's roof right now. If it's a freestanding structure, we would treat it like any other structure, and it's got to meet all the setbacks. We don't treat it as part of building height, so the building height issue would be treated like an accessory antenna would be, and would get that however many feet above whatever the maximum height is of the district.
But a quick question. We do require a permit for this because it's appurtenant to the house, and we don't want it to blow off in a windstorm.
Oh, sure. It's also electricity, so it's an electrical system.
So they need
like
a-
I tell the third graders, if it's going to zap you or blow up,
Or
then
blow
we
up.
need to get a permit,
So
or
they need
fall
a-
down. Right.
So they need a permit, so as long as it's a permitted item, then it is included.
Yes, so, I'm not going to amend the use table or anything like that, but I'm acknowledging the fact that our ordinance is not going by their standards, which is pushing for something which other places might not allow. So there it is. That's all I have to say. Does anyone have any other questions?
Any questions on that? None? Okay, thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Okay. Is there anything else before the board? None? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.